Hello, welcome back to Gives in the Bank Recruiting Podcast on BuckeyesCoop.com. I am Marc Givler. I am joined tonight by Bill Greene, as always. We do not have a special guest today. This is going to be a rankings podcast. This is the July 8th, 2020 episode. If you were on the site this morning, you saw our top 15 for the class of 2022 in the state of Ohio. Bill and I kind of put each of our lists together, combined them, did a little bit of a composite type of thing, and formulated a top 15 for Ohio in 2022. These kids will all be juniors in the fall. It was kind of interesting for me putting it together because we lost a lot of evaluation time this spring and summer with the lack of camps. But we've seen a lot of these kids at some point, whether it was during the season or at a workout or whatever it might be. So we felt comfortable enough kind of putting together an initial list. And, of course, we will update that throughout. But we're going to kind of count this down. We're going to go from 15 to 1, and we're going to kind of talk about each kid for a minute and then move on and talk about kind of how we put the list together. We had a couple of differences in our lists and things like that. So we'll get into that here as well. But let's jump right into it. Number 15 is Elijah Brown, a athlete tight end prospect out of Huber Heights, Wayne. This was a guy Bill's pretty high on. Had him quite a bit up the list here a little bit. And Bill, I'll give it to you. What do you like about this guy?
Yeah, he might be too low. And the thing people need to realize here is the kids that we are ranking tonight are 2022 guys were sophomores last season. 2 more years of high school to go. Elijah Brown is a legit 6'4", 6'5" athlete, can catch the football, can be moved around the formation. He's kind of an H-back guy right now, can catch it over the middle, can go deep. I mean, there's a lot to like with Elijah Brown. They list him at 230, and he looks thin. So this could be a 6'6", 250-pound kid when he gets to college that can run. He's already got, offer list in the teens. And I think this is a guy that Ohio State's going to look at real closely. I mean, he has a ton of potential here. I really like the tight ends in the 2022 class. So if they don't take 2 this year and decide to go look at 2 next year, I think Elijah Brown is in the picture. I think he's that good.
Yeah, it's interesting. I saw Wayne play this past year against Olentangy Liberty, and they seemed to have a lot of guys like Brown, a lot of guys, big athletic guys who are probably going to be much better players in 2 years than they are today. And Elijah's kind of in that category as well. I think his best football is still in front of him, and I think he's got some upward mobility, especially in my rankings. I know you had him kind of higher on your board than I did on mine, which is kind of why he settled in here at 15. So there's some serious untapped potential there for sure. Kind of moving on here, it's kind of a theme. We've got another guy who could eventually be a tight end. He's kind of a flex guy right now, and his name is Ryan Miller. He's a Northeast Ohio guy out of Kenston. This is a guy we both had at kind of the back end of our list. I think we each had him at 15 actually, but since we both had him on our list, he when the composite kind of formula we used came out, he pops in here at 14. Bill, what do you like from Ryan?
He reminds me so much of Joe Royer. Right now, Ryan Miller is probably 195 pounds, maybe 200 pounds, and 2 more years of high school to go. So that frame is going to fill out. But he is another 6'4", 6'5" guy, similar to Elijah Brown, although Elijah would be bigger. But Ryan might have the best hands of any kid in the state. Watch his film. I mean, he makes plays. He's got a huge catch radius. They play him out of the slot. He's an H-back kind of guy, and he is a really tough matchup right now. So this is another guy that I think, when Ohio State gets down to look at, their options at tight end next year, I think Ryan Miller's a guy they're going to look at. And I think, he's in the same boat. He might be better as a sophomore than Joe Royer was. So huge upside for Ryan, very athletic, good speed. So, he's a guy that we need to know. And I just love this guy, and I think the tight end position is so strong in Ohio for 2022. So this is a guy that can move up. Like I say, if he comes out at 220, 225 pounds, keeps his speed, then this is a guy that, is going to end up with 25 offers. So very high on Ryan Miller.
Yeah, I like Ryan's ability to catch the football, to split out wide. I'm a pretty big fan of the flex tight end that you can bulk up and, teach him how to block. And maybe that sounds easier. I mean, it's easy, it's not as easy as it sounds, I guess, to teach these guys how to block. So you kind of have to evaluate their toughness and their willingness to do things like that at the high school level, and then translate that to, okay, if he's a willing blocker, if he's a physical tough kid at 210 pounds, well, he should be even more physical and tough at 250 pounds.
Right.
So, that's kind of the thing to evaluate with Ryan here the next 2 years, is to make sure he'll be able to be kind of an all situations player. But I'm really high on his ability as a receiver, as a pass catcher, as a receiving threat, flex tight end type of guy. Number 13, we got another Northeast Ohio guy here that Bill's pretty high on, is Kentrell Marks. He's out of Valley Forge High School up near Cleveland. He's a running back athlete. Bill, what do you like about Marks?
I like everything about him. And like you say, at Valley Forge, he is not going to be as well known as Cleveland St. Ignatius, Lakewood St. Edward, or Cleveland Glenville, but, it's not his fault, where he plays. I mean, if you watch his film, you'll see a kid that can do everything. He could be a running back, a wide receiver. I think he might be better as a safety, as an athletic safety. He's got speed, got length. He can cut. He is the very definition of the athlete. When people came up with that as a category for positions, a lot of times it gets used, I think, incorrectly. But with Marks, I think it's very appropriate, because I have no clue where this kid's going to play in college football, but he's going to be playing somewhere at the Power 5 level. And he was the guy that probably got hurt in terms of accumulating early offers. He got hurt by not having the camps, because I don't think a lot of these college coaches wander into Valley Forge High School very often. So if he could have got out and went to all the camps this summer, his offer list might be 3 times what it is right now. But he's a great kid. I know the coach. And this kid's got a world of potential. And we just got to see in another year, where that position actually breaks down to where he fits best.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm most intrigued by him, is because I don't think we do know quite what he is yet. I'm not easily impressed by running back film at this point. I just feel like I feel like you go to any major metro area in the country and you trip over 10 good running backs. So for me, the size and athleticism is intriguing to me as like a safety, defensive back type. I'm going to be very curious to see how seriously he takes that. A lot of these guys, they want the ball in their hands. Is he going to be willing to be open-minded about future position? Because it's one of those things where I think for a guy of his size and athleticism, looking at the highest levels of football, there may be more opportunity and more money to be made on the defensive side of the ball. So I'm going to be very curious to watch him this fall. I've only seen the film so far. I have not seen him in person, so I'm going to be super interested to watch him this fall. He'll definitely be on my priority list. So that was number 13?
Right.
We are down to number 12. And this is a guy I actually just wrote about last week, and that is Springfield safety, Deleon Bradley. He is a free safety prospect, another guy out of Springfield that's been a great program over the years, tons of talent. Mo Douglas very high on Deleon. I know Ohio State's taking a very close look here, and I don't think it's saying too much to say that there's a good chance he'd have an offer right now if he had a chance to camp in June. I know he's kind of one of the top guys they are looking at right now in state that hasn't been offered. So that's going to be an interesting one. Very athletic, rangy kid. About 6 feet tall, about 185 pounds. So not huge kid, but decent sized kid. Again, very fluid, free safety type of guy, sideline to sideline guy. Bill, any thoughts on Bradley from what you've seen?
Yeah, it's funny how coaches kind of come up with the same type of players all the time. And haven't we seen Mo Douglas produce these kind of guys year after year after year? And this kid could be, one of the best he's had. I mean, he can churn out DBs. And Mo played DB in the NFL for several years, but I like Bradley a lot. You watch his film, and it just seems like a guy that's in the right position at the right time every single time. And I love the football IQ, love the length, can cover a ton of ground. So, yeah, he's a guy, like I say, does he fit with what Ohio State wants? I think he does. I think he's really made for that single high safety look, and that's not something I would say about every safety prospect in high school. But, to find out in the next week that Ohio State has offered him, would that shock me? Nope, not at all. I like him a lot, and I think his future is really bright.
Yeah, he's not really it's going to be interesting to maybe watch Ohio State's defense this fall and kind of see what they do in the secondary, because he's not a flex guy. He is a safety. Like, he's not, we look at an Andre Turrentine or a Jansen Dunn or something like that. Like, well, are they corner or are they safety? He's right. A safety, but he's definitely a guy that can play free safety. And it'll just be kind of interesting to see. I think he adds even a little more value now, because I think we're on agreement on this. I think we're both expecting them to do a little more two high safety looks, which I think adds to his value to them, versus the single high. You're kind of, you better make sure you get that single high right, because everyone else is a corner type of thing. And I think he's got some added value there if they're going to move in more of a multiple look direction. He's a heck of a player, and definitely a guy they're looking at closely. Number 11, this guy I'm so intrigued by. It's Medina quarterback Drew Aller. He's got so much potential. He's 6'5". He's a really good athlete, and he's not played a ton of quarterback. He told me he just started kind of taking it seriously his freshman year. Right. So we're talking about a guy who's really only played quarterback for 2 years, where he's really focused on that. Bill, you actually watched him throw, I think, about a week ago. What did you think?
Well, I loved the film when I saw it and couldn't wait to see him in person. And, the 6'4", 6'5" is absolutely legit. Probably 210 pounds right now. So he's going to add 20, 25 pounds to that frame, which is only going to add velocity to his throws. He is a baby as a quarterback. I mean, he didn't start playing it, like you say, as a freshman. And then last year as a sophomore, he sat behind a senior starter most of the year. And I don't know if that guy got hurt or if he just got replaced, but they started playing starting Drew at the end of the year. And the numbers he put up were staggering. I think he threw for 360 against Lakewood St. Edward in the playoff game. Now, they got beat. He got beat pretty well, but Drew kept him in that game all by himself. And you just don't throw for 360 yards on Lakewood St. Edward. That does not happen against those guys. So what I saw in person was great. I love the velocity that he can deliver the ball with, but I like the touch as well. So as he plays more football and he's in a really good program. They play a great schedule. Seems like a sharp kid, smart kid. His dad played college football, I believe, at Eastern Michigan. So the kid's been raised to be a football player, and he knows how hard he's going to have to work. And I just believe in this kid. I see him as an absolute Power 5 guy with, double-digit Power 5 offers. Ohio State going to look at him? Yeah, they know about him. They like him. But, you start talking Ohio State in the quarterback position, they can go anywhere in America and get who they want. So we'll see how that works out for Drew. But, I couldn't be higher on this guy. And as the experience raises, then his game is going to raise too.
Yep. No, I agree. I think he's very intriguing. I know I already mentioned I wanted to see Kentrell Marks, but this might be the guy I'm most interested in this fall to see if he can elevate things from, I think we think he's a Power 5 guy for sure. Can he take it to that next level? Because it seems like the physical talent is there to maybe just be more than just your standard Power 5 guy, to maybe be one of those guys who has a lot of big offers nationally. So that'd be interesting to see. All right, we're going to get into our top 10 here. Number 10 is an interesting one for me. Was obviously on both of our lists and pretty close together. I think maybe a couple spots higher on yours than mine, but we were in the same ballpark here as well. Stephen Bird, running back, maybe linebacker, Canal Winchester, just outside of Columbus here. Big 6'2", 200-pound guy, runs with power, has good speed for his size, of course. Very good sophomore film. A kid that I think we all wanted to see this spring and summer on the camp circuit, and maybe we will see him here at this upcoming camp we're going to on Saturday. But just a kid that's got just a big athletic kid that I think we're all intrigued by and kind of want to see more of. What have you seen out of him, Bill?
Yeah, I have not seen him in person yet, and I'm really looking forward to that. But just looking at the film, he looks like an Ohio running back. I mean, top of the line kind of guy that should end up with a ton of offers, a power speed guy. And I really want to see him in person. That's a guy that I just have never seen live yet. And boy, he sure looks like he has a lot of talent. And, again, when you look at, is he an Ohio State guy? I don't know. I don't know about that. But, he's going to be playing Power 5 football somewhere. And probably a guy that's going to be very, very productive and churn out a ton of yards. So really impressed by what I've seen so far. And with 2 more years of high school to go, we got to see where this guy takes it. But he's impressive.
Yeah, and Ohio State's taken a look there. He has visited. He has Tony Alford has been in touch with him. They do talk. So he's on the radar for sure. I guess at this point for me, is he Michigan State or is he Ohio State? I mean, he's definitely
right.
very good. And so it's just, especially taking 2 running backs in 2021 like they did, I think they're going to be pretty picky here in 22. But he's definitely in the mix. I think a little more juice, a little more wiggle here as he gets bigger, faster, stronger, could go a long way toward maybe taking him from as a really, really good guy to a potentially great prospect. So that's going to be something here to see this fall, how that looks, speed and quickness wise. The next guy does not lack speed and quickness. Number 9 is Caden Saunders. He's a wide receiver out of Westerville South here in Central Ohio. Big time speed. Just one of the fastest guys in the state, big time track kid, also a big time baseball prospect. So very athletic guy, a guy that Ohio State's looked at pretty closely over the past year or two. They've not pulled the trigger on yet. That was another guy who probably got hurt this year by the camps. I'm sure they wanted to work with him again this summer and see, the progressions he's made. He's a phenomenal kid, a phenomenal athlete. He's growing into the receiver role as more polished with his routes and just being a little bit more consistent. But the athleticism is certainly there. Bill, what have you seen from Caden?
Yeah, I saw him at the Best of the Midwest in Indianapolis before his freshman year, I believe. I mean, he was just a baby. And like you say, busted off a couple 4.25 40s. And right away, it was like, who's this guy? He wasn't the biggest guy in the world then, but he is growing. And perfect slot receiver, in my opinion. Kick returner, I want that guy with the ball in the open field. Penn State latched onto him early. They love him, and I can see why. Is he another Hamler for them? If he goes there, I know that's what they're thinking, and I know that's what they're trying to sell him on, and I get that comparison. I mean, that's really who he reminds me of, KJ Hamler, right there. And I love the kid. I think he fits with what Ohio State wants to do offensively. So would an offer from Ohio State shock me? Nope, not at all. I mean, I love this kid, and I think he's special with the football in his hands, and he's a threat to score from anywhere in the field.
Yeah, and he kind of falls, again, we're going back to what I was kind of talking about with Bird, where with what they've done at receiver lately, they're going to be picky here. And it's just, it's one of those deals where I think maybe in a year where they knew, hey, we're taking 3 or 4 receivers for sure, I think maybe he would have an offer by now. But I think, again, they've only offered, I believe, 3 receivers in the entire country. So they're taking it slow here. They're going to watch the early season film and kind of see that he's become, a more versatile receiver. And by that, I mean, not just a deep ball guy, but
right,
a guy who really dominates from series to series at the high school level. And I think that's where he can improve and just kind of be a little more consistent and be more than just a speed guy, because he has the ability for sure. And that's something that could move him up even higher for me. And, like I said, we've got him here at 9 in Ohio, so we obviously think very highly of him. Number 8's a guy that just continues to impress me more and more. I got to watch him work out recently. He's in great shape. It's Derek Shepard. He's a two-way lineman. Kettering Alter, big-time program. Wants to be a defensive tackle. I think could be a nose tackle, could be an offensive guard. Just kind of depends. What I saw last week in workouts, the feet there, I think he can be a nose tackle. Just a 300-pounder that can move. And a great kid and a guy who just watching him, and from what I've been told, the light switches went on the last 12 to 18 months in terms of the amount of work that it requires to become a great player. He seems to really have figured it out, it's a grind, especially these big guys. You're always the biggest guy out there on the field, but at some point that's going to end. At some point you're going to run into other big guys, and it's going to be about work ethic and technique and things like that. And Derek's been working his tail off this offseason, so I'm very excited about him moving forward. Bill, have you seen Derek at all, and kind of any thoughts on him?
I have not seen him in person. I've watched a ton of film on him just because, when I first got in touch with him, I liked him so much. He was so personable and so mature, and I just liked him a lot. So the more I watched that film, the more he reminds me kind of Davon Hamilton when Davon Hamilton was that age, and he's probably better as a sophomore than what Davon was, because Davon was looked at as a MAC kid up till, his senior year. So that's where I see Derek. I also see the O-line possibility, but I think he's a D tackle at the next level. And again, because Ohio State recruits nationally, recruits the best of the best, that's usually what I look at, is when I look at these kids and I'm trying to rank them and we're trying to put them in order. Does Derek Shepard, is he an Ohio State type kid? I think the answer is possibly, probably, and I think he's, just like we've said for probably every kid on this list so far, guy Ohio State knows about, a guy they should know about. And I think, too, he's a playmaker in the middle of the line. And we're looking at him now. He's a baby. I mean, where is Derek, a year and a half from now? Where does his body take him? Does he continue to mature and keep that work ethic? And, if he does, this is a guy that, could end up playing in the Under Armour All-American game or, the U.S. Army Bowl or something like that. I mean, he's that type of kid to me. So, number 8 right now in Ohio, could I see him sprinting up that list here in another year or so? Absolutely. Absolutely. I think he's right on the line as a high 3, low 4-star kid. And I think a lot of him.
Yeah, Larry Johnson is recruiting him already, is already aware. The reason I would, if I were in the war room there when they go over, do we offer this kid or not? The reason I think I would give it the thumbs up is, much like Billy Price several years ago, if it doesn't work out on defense, if for whatever reason, if he gets too big, you want a little more foot speed, whatever it is, you just flip him over to guard and he becomes a 325-pound mauler with plus athleticism for the position. He'd be a special athlete as a guard. That's really the difference. The difference between defensive tackle and guard is pretty much your feet.
Right.
If you have great feet, you're a defensive tackle. If you don't have great feet, you're an offensive lineman. Sorry, Kirk. But that's, and that was my thing with, and I think he's a better athlete than Billy Price, certainly at the same age. So, and obviously Billy worked great at offensive line for them. So I think it's kind of a low risk guy because I just think if he can't be your one tech, you just flip him over to guard and you can never have too many offensive linemen. So that's my kind of take there. And, here we go. We've got another lineman. This is a kind of a pure offensive lineman here. Coming in at number 7 is Blake Miller. Blake is another one of the talented linemen in this 2022 Ohio class that I think has a lot of really good offensive line prospects, especially if you count some of the flex guys like a Derek Shepard who could play both. But Blake is about maybe 6'6", about 310 pounds out of Strongsville. We've both seen Blake. Bill, you've probably seen him more than I have. What do you think of Blake?
Yeah, I really like him. He's a kid that knows who he is. Okay. He knows that he's got to keep that weight down. Blake Miller, like you say, at 300 to 310. Yeah. Number 7 in Ohio. When Blake has a horrible summer, which I don't think he's going to have, and comes back at 335 or 340, then no, he's not number 7 in Ohio at that point. He becomes some questionable at that point. But I don't think we're going to see that out of this kid. He is working out like a fanatic, and he knows what he needs to work on. He's working on yoga. He's working on flexibility. Not the most athletic guy in the world, but a guy that he loves to play football. He loves to compete, loves to hit people. I saw him as a freshman when I went to see J.D. Duplain, and they had Blake playing nose tackle, and that was not going to be his college position for sure, but they needed him there, and he played it, and he battled and fought, but you could see that his future was on the O-line. Is he a tackle? Maybe a right tackle. We got to see. Guard for sure, but he's a people mover. And that's what I like about Blake. And I love the work ethic. I love the maturity. So very high on Blake. Expect big things from him. I was not surprised at all that Ohio State offered. And, it's all up to Blake right now. If he'll continue the path he's on right now, then, it's a solid 4-star kid if he continues to work.
Yeah, I saw him against Shaker Heights as a freshman. Also,
right. We were there the same day.
That game together, actually.
Yep.
And I kind of noticed the similar things you did, where I saw the body and the frame. I'm like, well, he's not going to be a nose tackle long term, but I liked the compete level, the toughness, and he moved pretty well especially for a young guy. Those young guys are oftentimes, like baby giraffes or whatever. They don't know where they're going half the time. And he seemed to have, he was pretty coordinated, big guy. And I think he's a guard. I don't know that I would waste too much time trying to play the is he a tackle game once he gets to his school of choice, which I do expect to be Ohio State. But I'd slot him in at guard. I think that's where he's best. I think could he in a pinch play tackle? Sure, I think he probably could, but I think he's kind of a guy just plug in at guard and let him go, and that's kind of what I would do. But heck of a player. Not to give away the rest of the list, it's not going to be a huge surprise, but he's currently our number 2 offensive lineman in the state of Ohio.
Right.
We'll get to who is above him here in a few minutes, but like I said, if you're number 2 offensive lineman in this class in Ohio, you're pretty good, because while I don't think the class as a whole is maybe as good as this 2021 class, it has a lot of depth at offensive line. So if you're number 2 in the offensive line class in Ohio in this cycle, that's a pretty high compliment, I think. Number 6 is a guy I actually had a little bit higher than this, but we slot him in here at 6 in the composite, and he's maybe my favorite guy to watch in Ohio in the class, and that is Cincinnati LaSalle running back Jabron Payne. Special talent, very athletic, quick, elite open field runner. We'll find out more about his between the tackles toughness this fall. They lost their hammer, Cameron Porter, last year, was their between the tackles guy. So I suspect Payne will do more of that this fall. We'll learn a little bit more about his toughness between the tackles type stuff. But a guy I think we both really like a lot. It's been getting some big offers. Alabama just recently. Bill, what have you seen out of Payne?
Yeah, now I've only seen him play live once, and that was that state championship game against Massillon. He was really good. I mean, but what he did in that game was it was all jet sweeps, everything on the edge, and he was just faster than the Massillon defense, and he would run wide, get a few blocks on the outside, make a cut, and pick up 10 yards every time. So I didn't see him do much else in that game other than that. And that was kind of my lasting memory on him. And then if you pop in the film and watch the film, he does have a lot of runs between the tackles. And he's really good because all he has to do is make one guy miss in the inside, in the middle of the field there, and then he's going to cut. And then there's a problem. He's loose. So another thing that people may not realize is he plays defense for them too. And he plays linebacker. And he's got some toughness to him, which I like to see. So he's more than just a speed guy on the outside. They throw it to him a lot too, which they didn't throw to him in the state championship game, but his film shows him, catching a lot of swing passes and screen passes. And in that situation, he's a handful because all he has to do is make one guy miss, and then he's off to the races. So, he could be a little too low here, and I think maybe you're right on this, and I could be wrong, but I think we're splitting hairs here between, Gibran, and I think it'd be easy to rank him in the 3 or 4 spot too, and we'll see. These guys will determine their own ranking. They all have 2 more years of high school to go, but this guy, man, what an open field threat he is. And he's going to get bigger. You can tell he's got a frame to fill out. Maybe he's a 200-pound, 205-pound tailback at the next level. But there's going to be a next level for this kid. And it's going to be pretty good, too.
Yeah, I think there's 2 things from Ohio State's standpoint here. I think, first of all, under the old Urban Meyer offense where the H was kind of more of a hybrid than a pure slot receiver, I think Payne already probably has an offer.
Right. Urban would see him as his Curtis Samuel.
Yep. So I think that's one thing. And then, of course, now they've taken 2 running backs in 2021, but 2 very good players. I don't think I don't think we yet know if they could take a second running back in 22. So to me, it looks like a 1-back class unless there's some unexpected attrition. And then in that case, you better make sure you get an every down back. And I think we'll know more about whether Payne is that every down back here this fall, as we talked about with Cam Porter moving on to Northwestern. I expect Gibran to get more of those between the tackles type touches and get a better evaluation of him as a complete running back, because we know he can do the in-space stuff. We know he can catch the football. And I'm optimistic that we'll see what we need to see this fall as well, because like you pointed out, he does play defense and is a tough kid. So there's no reason to think he can't do those things. It's just a matter of seeing him. So All right, we're getting into our top 5. This is a kid we both had at number 5, which is I think is kind of interesting because he doesn't have the offer list of the last couple guys we've talked about yet. But Bill and I both have him 5 on our own personal list, which made this an easy slot at 5 on the composite list. And that is Lakewood St. Edward defensive lineman Trey Bixby. Why don't you start off here on Trey, Bill? You've seen him even more than I have. I saw him once last year. You've seen him, I think, quite a bit. What do you see in Trey?
Yeah, and this is a guy that when, I sent you my list, we didn't really go over this at first. It was kind of like, you do your list, I'll do my list, and then we'll talk about it afterwards. And this was a guy that when I stuck him in there at 5, and I truly believe he belongs at 5, I thought you would come in with him at 9 or 10. And I kind of thought, well, maybe I'm reaching here, although I believe in this kid. So, I was really glad to see that you saw him as 5 in the state as well. They just don't start a lot of sophomores at Lakewood St. Edward. And when they do, they're usually, headed toward Power 5. And that's where I think this kid's headed. He's got height, length, quickness. He's a tough kid. You play that schedule, Lakewood, they're not putting you on the field at Lakewood St. Edward if you're not a really tough kid as a sophomore. They dress 100 guys. They don't need to play sophomores. They win state titles all the time. So I love that about Trey. And then you get to know the kid, and he's so motivated. He wants to be great. And he was a really, really good pass rusher, which was no surprise, with his length and quickness coming off the edge. But I saw him really, it just worked out that I saw him in back-to-back weeks last year, and he was great against the run. I think you were there one of the days I was there when, he played a big part in stopping the Winton Woods running attack. They tried to run at him a lot, and they had no success running at him. So they had to go somewhere else. So Trey is not physically developed yet to where he's going to be, but he competes like crazy, and there's just so much to like about him. And when I look at Trey Bixby as a senior, this could be a guy with 20 Power 5 offers. I mean, I just think the world of him, and I was really glad to see that you ranked him at 5 as well.
Yeah, I just and part of this for me was position value. I just think in today's game, you got to have guys who can rush the passer. And it's not even so much – I don't even know that he's a perimeter guy. I actually think he's kind of tailor-made for that 3-tech spot. I think he's the type of interior pass rusher that Larry Johnson loves to recruit. I think that's what he grows into. But his length and his explosiveness and his smarts and his toughness and everything else, I think the world of him long term. And I think once he settles in on that defensive line, whether he figures out, whether he's an edge guy or an interior guy, like I said, I think he's an interior guy ultimately. But you got to have pass rushers, and you got to have them. And it's not just the edges anymore. You have to have pass rushers all up and down your defensive line. And he's a guy who's going to be able to do that. His wingspan's crazy.
Right.
I think we know he's going to get unbelievable coaching at the high school level. So we know he's going to improve the next 2 years. He's going to be coached up. So I think long-term, he's going to be a really good player. He's one of those kids, I think if he had been able to camp with Ohio State in June, I think they probably would have made a move on him. But, we'll see how the early season film looks. All right, moving on. This is a player who is, I believe some people would say is the number 1 player in Ohio for the class. We've got him in at 4, and we'll kind of dive into that a little bit later, kind of how he arrived at 4. But that's Marysville linebacker Gabe Powers. Obviously, a guy with an Ohio State offer and a guy they're recruiting pretty heavily right now. What do you see in Gabe, Bill? Is he a linebacker? Is he a defensive end?
Yeah, nobody knows. And I even talked to his dad about this. His dad is a coach too, and his dad doesn't know. And a lot's going to depend on where his body takes him. I just love the kid, and I don't care what he is. If he's a DN, then I'm going to start him at DN, and he's going to wreck people. And if he's a linebacker, then I'm starting him at linebacker, and he's going to hurt people there. He is a really, really smart football player that is tall and long, can run to the football, tough as nails. I just love the kid. Had you ranked him at 1, I don't know that I'd have had much of an argument with you. You know, I mean, he is that special. That is just a solid 4-star kid. I love how hard he plays. I love it. I love the quickness and the agility for his height. So we're going to see where he ends up, and it would not bother me. So if he ends up a linebacker, I'm taking him, and I'm going to start him at linebacker. And if he ends up being a DN, I'm taking him there too, and he's going to start for me there too. So I don't care where he ends up. Where some of these tweener guys, you want him as a linebacker, but you don't want him as a DN, or vice versa. With this kid, I do not care where he ends up because he's going to play for me, and he's going to start multiple years. And this is an all Big Ten type of kid. And if he stays healthy, he's going to play in the NFL for probably 10 years. So Gabe Powers is someone that I am very, very, very high on.
Yeah, I'm taking a bit of a more conservative angle right now, and we're down to the top 5 in the state, so we're not slapping anyone in the face here.
No,
we
not
obviously
at all.
like him a lot. If he's at number 4, that says a lot. But I'm just taking a little more conservative angle. I do kind of want to get a feel for what he is. I watched him work out with Butch Reynolds several weeks ago, and he's working on his speed, his footwork. That was all very encouraging, regardless of where he ends up. You have to have great feet to play this game, and whether you're a linebacker or you're a defensive end, you have to have great feet. So that was super encouraging. I tend to think he's going to slide down a defensive end, and honestly, at that point, if he does that, that actually will increase his value in my mind. If he's a pure edge rusher, that could actually give him some upward mobility on my own personal rankings. Because right now, if you look at, and we'll get to this in a few minutes, but a lot of my major decisions in the top 5 or 6 started to come down to, if it was close, I went with position value. And so that's part of why probably Gabe's sitting here at 4 is I kind of went with some guys who I felt brought a little more in terms of position value. But if I can get the sense that his body's going that direction, and I'm starting to get that sense, he could, and he shows me some stuff on the field this fall that leads me to believe he'll be successful there. I could see him kind of sliding up my board a little bit here, but great kid, super hard worker. Certainly size and athleticism you want to see. So definitely a bright future there. Number 3, we're going to stay at linebacker. And we both had this kid at 3. So there was no tally needed here. He was 3 on both. And that is Kettering Alter linebacker, CJ Hicks. For me, the thing with CJ that I love and that I think bodes very well for his future is that he is fully bought in that he's a linebacker now. I stopped to see him last week at his workout. He's 220 pounds now. So the free safety cornerback dreams are long in the rear view. He knows he's a linebacker, but I think he's a special one. I think he's an every down linebacker. He's a new age linebacker, the guy that can stay on the field in all situations, that can cover tight ends, that can cover backs. I think he's a freak. And if he wasn't a linebacker, if he played maybe a different position that had maybe a little more position value, maybe, and still could be even at linebacker. He's definitely in the discussion for the number 1 player in the state of Ohio. For me, what do you think, Bill?
Yeah, saw him last year at the Ohio State camp, and they actually worked him out as a cornerback, and Hafley loved it. And he was so impressive. Not that we thought he was going to play cornerback ever, but the fact that he could do that and play in space as well as he did, going against some really good receivers down there at Ohio State. I can remember 2 or 3 occasions he got matched up with a blazer out of Akron Bookdale, Martavian Johnson. And Martavian's got Louisville, Maryland. And I thought, well, he's going to tear CJ apart. And no, he had a hard time. CJ locked him up. And I knew right then, if you can do that at his size, then like you said, this is a 3-down backer. You do not have to remove this guy if you're playing a spread offense. There's a place for him. I thought his sophomore film was good, but I expected more, and that's why I had Powers ahead of Hicks, was just production. But I think CJ is a little bit more raw than what Gabe Powers is, but, probably has maybe more long-term, maybe a higher ceiling and lower floor than Powers. I could see CJ being the best player in the country his senior year. But I did expect more when I saw his film. I expected a little more out of him, and maybe that's me. Maybe my expectations were just so unrealistic. But this is a guy that, when you look at the physical talent he's been blessed with from a length and athleticism and speed, and man, he got blessed with some serious talent. So I agree with you. I could see him, this could be a top 20 kid nationally at some point. So this is a guy I can't wait to see this year play real football. So when the games start, I'm going to get down there and see them early because I can't wait to see CJ Hicks.
He reminds me so much of Darren Lee, and even to the point that, and I think this goes to the point of what you were getting at with his film, which I agree isn't, if you think his ceiling is that of a potential 5-star prospect, it probably wasn't 5-star film. But he's also much like Darren when he came out of New Albany. They move him around. He might play corner. He might play on the boundary. He might play safety. He's going to play some running back. It just the advantage I think Powers has is that Gabe has always kind of been a linebacker, and they've always kind of just let him be what he is. Whereas CJ, playing at a smaller school with, you're going to ride your top guys at these smaller schools. You're going to put them in different spots. It's what you should do as a high school coach. You're trying to win games. Has maybe not had the opportunity to just zero in on one position. I think that's something that does, impact him in terms of appearing to be a little raw at this stage. And I think that's a fair statement. And I think it's something that gives him that upward mobility later where it's like, okay, once he can really just lock in on being a linebacker, wow. And so he reminds me so much of Darren in those respects, but yeah, he was in my thought process for number one. So we'll see. Yeah, we'll see how it goes this fall. Number two, and this is the guy who kind of shook everything up, I think, is Ohio State cornerback commit Jair Brown, who obviously just transferred in from Louisiana. He was living in New Orleans. He's now up in the Cincinnati area. Will be at Lakota West. He is our number 2 player. Neither of us, I don't think, have seen him in person at this point.
No, I have not.
We're going on film. We're going on I'm going on a little bit of feedback I got from some guys down in Louisiana. But I look at film. I look at measurables. I look at premium position of corner. Can't have enough corners right now. He's what they've recruited historically. When we talk about this run of corners they're on, he's a 6-foot guy, lockdown guy, super competitive. One of those guys who is going to break up a pass and then he's going to let the entire stadium know that he broke up the pass, which I think at some positions maybe you don't love, but I think at that position you kind of have to have that edge.
Right. Agree.
What do you think of him, Bill, just from watching him on film? I know we're very excited to watch him this fall. At least one of us, if not both of us, will be at the opener this fall.
Yeah, I didn't know what to do with him. I really didn't. Watch the film. I don't know what I'm watching. I don't know who he's playing against. Obviously, the skills they pop, but I thought I really wanted to kind of be conservative with him. I didn't know what to do with him. He would have been like an incomplete for me until I get to lay eyes on him, which we will do, soon in the season. So obviously super talented kid, can flip his hips and run. And like you say, when I look at cornerback at Ohio State, does Jair Brown can he compete with Gary and Conley? Can he compete with Eli Apple? Can he compete with Marshawn Lattimore, Sean Wade? Does he fit that group? And from the film I see from last year, I say yes. And I can see why Ohio State offered him. So he's the guy that I thought we could have ranked for either 2, 3, or 4, but I think we'll get a better handle on him and we can lay eyeballs on him live, and really looking forward to doing that because it's a guy that, when they move in from out of state, man, it's almost like, the new girl that moves into the high school that you can't wait to get to know. So Jair, to me, we'll put him down to me as a future guy. I want to see him, but what we do know about him is pretty darn good.
And we don't have to go far to get to number 1. And this was actually unanimous between the two of us. We had the same number 1, which I was a little surprised about, actually. I thought I was maybe going outside the box here. I guess I'm not. We have Brown's now teammate, Lakota West, offensive tackle Tegra Tashabola. Bill, I guess first, what was your thought process here with number 1?
Like you had mentioned before, probably the position that he plays, because I think he's probably a right tackle to next level. And when I look at Tegra, I see as a sophomore, I saw someone that reminded me of Thayer Mumford when Thayer Mumford was a senior at Massillon. He is so much better as a sophomore than what Thayer was. It's not even close. He was better as a sophomore than what Thayer was as a junior. So that's pretty good, thinking that, Thayer worked his way onto the field as a true freshman at Ohio State. So the thing I like about the kid, I mean, he is a bad dude. You watch that film and you can nitpick him a little bit for his hand placement. Maybe he's too high. You can nitpick all you want, but he kind of reminds me, you got to go back, like old school, when Eric Williams played for the Cowboys and Emmitt Smith and Troy Aikman and Mike Irvin and those dudes. And Eric Williams was a guy you could nitpick too, but what he did was beat people up. And he did that really well. And that's where I see Tegra. And Tegra's only a sophomore. I mean, he's got 2 more years to work on that technique, but he loves to play football. He loves to mash people, loves to compete. He's got a little mean streak there that I really like in an O-lineman. And the only drawback will be that they're going to run the ball 90 to 95% of the time, and you worry about, pass blocking. But Thayer Mumford didn't have a lot of pass blocking experience, when he came to Ohio State. So Tegra to me is a guy, again, if he stays healthy, stays on the right path, he's going to start multiple years at Ohio State. He's going to get drafted high. He's going to play 10 years in the NFL. And, I think I know where his future is. If he does all the things he's supposed to do, then he's going to be fine. And we're going to be hearing about Tegra for the next 15 years.
Yeah, I'm with you. So I don't, and we'll get into this maybe here in a minute, but I think he's kind of a tier below Paris Johnson as a prospect.
Oh, no doubt. Not even, they don't compare.
But,
one's a ballet dancer and the other one's a bouncer in a bar.
Right.
Tegra's the bouncer.
Right. But, and kind of where I was going with that is, as sophomores, Paris had the long term, the frame, everything else, and the technique I think was better, but he didn't quite maul people the way Tegra did sophomore.
No.
That came later when Paris kind of grew into his frame. And I love his explosiveness. He plays a violent brand of football. He does lunge too much. I do want to see him be more kind of work on his natural bend, being more of a knee bender versus kind of a more of a waist guy. I do want to see some things there. I like you said with the hand placement, I saw some lunging against Elder.
Oh yeah.
Live eval. It's like, you don't need to lunge, man. You're 6'6", you got long arms. They'll come to you. But the effort, the athleticism, the explosiveness at that size, I do think, like all young linemen, when they're big like he is, we talked about this a little bit with Blake Miller. And there's no reason to think he won't do this, but he's got to be mindful of his body. He's got
Right.
that body
Right.
type that if you get complacent, you can be 330, 340, 350 in a hurry. And we kind of saw that with Jackson Carman when he went up
Yep. And he
the
had to
ladder.
lose all that weight when he
Yep.
went to Clemson, and
Right.
that was make or break. Well, why go through that? Just
Right.
stay at 310, and you don't have to go through that where they're trying to make or break you.
Yep. And that's so there are those would be my questions, but again, I had him number one in the state, so we're nitpicking at this point. I have him number
And
one
he's
in
an
Ohio
easy
right
kid
now.
to nitpick, right? He's an easy kid to
Yep.
nitpick bullcrap. Don't nitpick him. Just let him kill people. But he's playing in a system for Tom Bolden that he's going to get great coaching. And I really like Tom. I don't like the offense he runs, but I like the discipline he instills in those kids. And he is a great football coach, great staff. So Taker's going to learn the game the right way. And they'll fix all these little things that we're nitpicking a 16-year-old sophomore for when he's playing one of the most demanding positions in football, the position that takes the longest to develop at any position in the field. So when we nitpick, and I just, and I did it myself. I'm watching the film thinking, I wish he didn't do that. I wish he didn't do that. And then he blasts somebody, and I thought, boy, I'm sure glad he does that. So to me, he's the number one prospect in the state. And, all those other things are going to get fixed. But, boy, the things he can do, you can't coach. And I love seeing big guys that are bad dudes that love to play football. I've seen so many big guys that play football because they're the biggest kid in the school, and they dominate everybody, and at some point that goes away. Well, I don't worry about this kid. I don't worry about him, in a couple of years having to block the top D lineman in the country. I think he's special, and I love the fact that he plays for Tom Bolden, and Tom Bolden's program is all about toughness. And this kid is going to come to Ohio State as a bad dude. And then you just work on the pass protection. You work on all the other little things we talked about. But he's going to be physically ready to play.
Yep. So here's my kind of take on number one in that class, and I'll see if you agree or not. Personally, I like this class because I think there is serious debate about number one. I personally considered Tegra. I personally considered Jair Brown, but I thought that was too aggressive at this point. Even though I had him number two, I thought that was maybe take the heat off a little bit, not put him number one right away. And I personally considered C.J. Hicks. I could also see a Gabe Powers, a Trey Bixby, a Gibran Payne playing their way into that discussion as well. But I consider three guys. We've had it so easy. In 2019, it was clearly Zach Harrison. In 2020, it was clearly Paris Johnson. In 2021, it is clearly Jack Sawyer.
Right.
I don't see it that way at all in 22. Do you see it that way, or how do you think this is a kind of a broad discussion? And if so, kind of like how many guys did you consider at number one?
I considered Gabe and Tegra, but Tegra really was pretty easy for me, to be honest with you. With Jair is that incomplete that I didn't know what to do with. And then CJ is that untapped, raw potential, that stallion that needs to be broken yet. But, so I think, the four, I think, are candidates for number one. I didn't have Bixby there or Payne. I thought there was a line. I think there's four in the mix for that number one spot. For July 8th, July 7th, Tegra was pretty easy for me to put him at number one, but I can see Gabe or CJ or Jair, jumping up there, and that's the beauty of real football. And, hopefully we're going to be seeing real football. If things go the way we want them to go, these guys are going to have pads on in another 4 to 5 weeks. And that is going to be amazing, to be able to get out and see scrimmages. And then the season starts, and there's some great early season matchups. So I'm praying we get football this year, because so many of these guys, we got cheated. We didn't get to see the spring evaluation phase in May and April. We didn't get to see the camps in June. I'm dying to see these guys personally.
Yeah, and I think that maybe went into some of my indecisiveness as I kind of weighed 3 or 4 guys for number one, was that I did feel kind of robbed of a very critical 6 months of evaluation for this class. And so that's making it more difficult. Ultimately with Tegra, I did go with him position value, just kind of where he's at right now as a player versus where maybe CJ Hicks or Gabe Powers are at. I think they're maybe best football could be in front of them, especially CJ. And so, yeah, it was a more nuanced decision for me than usual. Like I said, I think we've had it very easy the last 3 cycles. I think you'd be hard pressed to go back in the history, the last 30, 40 years in Ohio, and find 3 years in a row, like 2019, 2020, and 2021, where it just seems so obvious who number one was. Kind of 3 years in a row. So I do think it's a little more up in the air, although, like, again, Tegra was a choice I was comfortable with. But yeah, I'm not seeing the Harrison or the Paris Johnson or the Jack Sawyer yet. And again, I could be missing something, or I could be right and it's not there, or I could simply just be, it could be the fact that we did lose these 6 months and maybe something would have grabbed me in June or May or something. That hasn't grabbed me yet. But that's kind of where I'm at with it. I think this list is more fluid. It's always fluid this early. I think it's even more fluid than normal. That's just kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. Yep.
But,
With you all
we'll
the
see.
way
I
there.
know. Yeah, we're both excited to get back out there. We've been able to do a little, watch some workouts, some things like that. But we're both ready for some real football to take place. And again, hopefully we get that here in about 4 or 5 weeks at the most. Hopefully we get that. So we'll wrap this up now. We went a good bit here, but we kind of wanted to go in depth on our first rankings with the site. And again, if you're for some reason you're listening to the podcast before you've had a chance to visit the site, there is a write-up up on the site with the top 15. So you can if you're more of a reader than a listener, you can go read that piece and see the list in order, and we'll have a quick comment on each guy by one of us. So you can see the list there on BuckeyeScoop.com. But we're going to sign off now. We appreciate you listening, and we'll see you guys next week.